Hi, welcome to episode 530 of The Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy Kira on Instagram and over at Blue Sky. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, and that's where this episode and every episode show notes will be. And I have an Etsy shop where I sell my hand-spun yarn and knitting patterns. Hi, how are you? It is Tuesday, October 7th, and I am a day late to podcasting. I went out of town this weekend. I was on business at Quilt Market in Houston, which was my first time at that show. It is an industry trade show where I went with our purchasing and buying team. I guess those both mean the same things. With our purchasing team to see what's new and chat with our vendors and find some new inspiration and maybe some new talent to include in our tutorials for next year. So it was a big event for me. I left on Friday, October 3rd. My flight actually got into Houston early that day. I got in at 10 a.m. and I had the rest of the day to kill. And I have to thank the purchasing manager because she said to me, "You should go to NASA." And I was like, NASA? And then I remembered that Johnson, the Houston Space Center is there, as is, I think it's Johnson Laboratory, or maybe it's called Johnson Space Center. Excuse me. And so I got to go to NASA. Some of the buildings at the Space Center are shut down because we are in a government shutdown right now in the United States. However, hold on, let me get a sip of something. However, the museum itself is run by a nonprofit, and so I could go to the museum and tour the museum, and then there were certain tours of the campus that were still open. Sorry. Oh, I think I'm done now. So I arrived at NASA at around noon, and I got to explore the museum and watch, they have a feature film in there right now that runs about an hour, and it is about all the Apollo missions that the United States conducted. These were back in the late 60s and early 70s, and these were the missions that went to the moon, the ones that took Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and took them to the moon. So we had our first moonwalk, and it was an amazing film. It talked about how that all kind of got put together and pushed by our presidents in the space program in the 60s and 70s, and how we put a man on the moon. And then it paired it with 50 years later, or more than 50 years later, we are working on the Artemis missions, which is to send more astronauts back to space and back to the moon. And so it was a really, really moving film. When I am a child of I was born in 1978. And so I am a child of the 80s, where space exploration was a big thing. I do remember the Challenger explosion. I remember all kinds of things. And it's because it has always been sort of part of my lexicon. I never really stopped to think like how amazing it is that we send people to space in suits that look a little bit crazy and have to keep them safe, and how every second is imminent danger up there, and how it really is a exploration of a new space. I also was terribly moved by the fact that every time they talked about going to space and exploring space, that it was from a position of coming in peace, exploring with hope, learning more science. And so it was really incredibly moving. I found myself moved to tears during the video, during the movie. It was just really kind of amazing. Anyway, and then the most fun of the tour is I paid a little bit extra to go on a tram ride that took us out to Mission Control. And this is literally the room where it happened, Mission Control at Houston. As in Houston, we have a problem. And they had restored the old Mission Control Center to the way it was at the time of the moon landing. And there was sort of a gallery behind where all the engineers and scientists were working and were, staying awake for all the time that everyone was in space and monitoring everything. And the gallery behind had been there before. It was a place where family members of the astronauts could be. And they had two TVs up in the corners that were broadcasting the news reports of the day. So like Walter Cronkite and others. And we got to sit there and watch. They sort of had this taped section where they put all the information up on the screens, and we got to watch the simulation of what happened during the first moon landing, about 10 minutes of it, and then getting them back to the spacecraft and back onto the shuttle. Well, not the shuttle, getting them back onto the spacecraft, and then re-entry to Earth. It was really, really amazing. And I would say that if you ever find yourself in Houston, it is definitely worth an afternoon. The museum itself had some of the spacesuits, and then they talked a lot about how the rockets and shuttles and International Space Station is constructed. They had like all kinds of solar panels and just really cool science exhibits. And it was an amazing activity to do in the afternoon. And so I just went out there and spent 3 or 4 hours out there, and it was wonderful. I definitely want to go back and bring my husband with me. Anyway, and then the weekend I spent at Quilt Market. So Saturday and Sunday, there were events on Friday that we did not attend, and then Saturday, Sunday, and Monday were kind of the 3 days of the show. Now, this is an industry trade show. It's not a consumer show. That is Quilt Festival, which is happening this week, in which there is a judged quilt show, and then there are vendor booths and classes and all kinds of things that consumers can do. What I was doing was I was a part of fabric stores, pattern designers, etc., and all the fabric companies and quilt designers were there exhibiting, and basically you could wander the aisles, and it's where people make purchases for the season, see the new fabric lines, sort of meet up and reconnect in person. And it was super interesting for me because it was my first time, and actually it was very much one of those situations where, I don't know if you've ever had an experience like this, where you just kind of look around and wonder how you got to where you are in life. The last time I had one of these experiences, not that I don't work hard, but the last time I had one of these experiences was many years ago, probably 8 or 10 years ago. One of Wes's aunt's husbands passed. I don't call him Wes's uncle because they married like when Wes was in his 30s. So anyway, I went to this funeral in Oklahoma, and I was sitting in this tiny little chapel in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there were stained glass windows, and it was this really tiny little chapel, and I was sitting in the pews next to people wearing 10-gallon cowboy hats and cowboy boots, and the fire brigade came in and gave him a salute because he was a former firefighter. He had been a former bull rider, so there was like all kinds of that. He had been a former Mason, and I just remember sitting in this tiny little chapel in the middle of Oklahoma thinking, I have no idea how I got here in my life. I mean, I was born and raised on the West Coast. I was a little Jewish girl, and I assumed that I would always like live and die in Los Angeles. And it was just one of these moments that I was not at all, okay, I should say, I was not at all unhappy to be there. I was sorry we were there for a funeral, obviously. I was not at all unhappy with where I was in life, but I just kind of looked around and was like, I couldn't have planned, if I thought in my wildest dreams what my life might be like, 5 or 10 years from now, I couldn't have planned that I would be sitting in that little chapel, in that little stained glass chapel in the middle of Oklahoma, next to men in actual cowboy hats and cowboy boots and pressed white shirts. And so I had a little bit of that this weekend because so many people in the fabric industry, everyone I went with has been in the fabric industry for anywhere between 20 and 40 years. And so I was definitely, also our whole team is kind of from the East Coast. So I definitely was the misfit, both in age and experience and in like background. And it was kind of an experience to walk the show with people who had so much history in the industry, had worked at a variety of companies, and now have worked for Missouri Star for 15 years. And, I kind of knew that our company was a decent sized player in the industry, but it was really surreal to be walking around and doing the things that I was doing. And I'm fortunate and so lucky to be where I am, and I'm enjoying it. And it was definitely a moment to step back and appreciate that. So that was kind of my weekend. I flew home yesterday. By the time I actually got home, it was about 1:30 or 2 o'clock, and I was exhausted. Nothing like a conference center to take it out of you. The floors are concrete. You walk and stand all day. I just got home. I fell asleep for almost 3 hours and woke up in time to lift some weights and have dinner with my husband. And then today it is back to work, and I am trying to get back into the swing of things after being gone for a couple days and kind of re-engage my brain. Leaving the every day is wonderful. It allows you to sort of expand your perspective. And I had a really amazing time. I'm so fortunate that I was able to go, but then coming back home, I'm like, how do I integrate this with everything that is still going on? Anyway, so that is kind of a brief update of what I have been up to. It was a fabulous trip. I would recommend it. And now I'm back to the grind, and we're getting into, I work retail, obviously, so we're getting into holiday gift guides and working towards Black Friday and the end of the year, and then starting the cycle all over again because we have plenty of things that happen in January. So all of that is to say, I saw and experienced a lot, and I did not knit very much. So I'm going to show you 2 knitting projects. I'm going to show you a very wee bit of spinning, and then I'm going to talk about 2 quilting projects that I am going to be starting hopefully this weekend. So it should be a pretty quick podcast. I hope that you are doing well where you are. It rained all this morning, and I'm hoping that that means fall weather is on the way. I think I might have picked out the sweater that I want to knit for Nini Swaymo. That's National Knit a Sweater Month. And so I'm feeling kind of refreshed and ready to go, but I don't have a lot of knitting to report for this last week. I was cramming to kind of leave for work, and then I just didn't knit that much while I was away. So let's talk about the 2 things that are on my needles right now. The first is I am knitting a sock for my nephew. It will be a pair of socks, and I need to get moving on this, but I am knitting socks for my nephew out of some yarn that I picked up in Kentucky in May. It is called Deep Dyed Yarns, and it is their Good Juju sock base, which is a 75/25 merino nylon in the colorway Beetlejuice. So this is the label, and this is the fun yarn. It is neons and black, and what I decided was that I needed to pick up a pattern that had some variation in it. I was really hoping to avoid pooling. And so what I picked was Cookie A's Monkey Sock, which was a free pattern on Ravelry. I'm sorry, a free pattern on Knitty magazine years and years and years ago. I think everybody I know has knit a pair of monkey socks. And I had to modify the pattern ever so slightly because the kids' feet, it was written for a standard 64 stitch sock. And the kids' feet are smaller than that. So I had to modify for that. And I showed you the cuff last week, and I finished the cuff. So I did, I think, 2 repeats on the cuff while I was gone. And then I went and turned the heel, and now I am ready to pick up for the gusset. Oh, and it looks like, no, my needles are okay. So that is where I am at with that one. I really love how it's coming out. As I said, I really thought that the monkey sock might be good because it would keep it from pooling too much. There are little bits and pieces and areas where it is, but I think it will keep the visual interest. As I go into the foot, I'm definitely going to keep the foot stockinette, and I can't decide whether I'm going to keep the top of the foot stockinette. Part of me would really like to continue the pattern down the foot, and then part of me can't decide like if I think it will wear comfortably for the kids. So I am going to work on that this week and hopefully get into the second one soon, because I also have a pair of socks to knit for his sister. So I really would like to keep those moving, but that is where I am at with that. Like I said, I think I added a pattern repeat or 2, and then of course I turned the heel, and hopefully by next time I will have a finished sock. If I had started the second one, that would be even better, but I'm not going to push myself too hard on that. So we'll see, but that is this week's project. The second project that I'm working on is I started a scrappy blanket. This was out of some yarn that I wanted out of my stash, and I'm knitting it, holding it together with some fingering weight bits and bobs that are in my stash, and this is turning into a very scrappy project, and I'm almost done with the first 2 skeins of the worsted weight, and let's see how far I've gotten. I actually haven't measured. I just got here last night, and let's see how far I am. So it looks like I am about 8.5, 9 inches in on the blanket. And so I'm definitely going to need to order more of that orange. I found some on D-Stash, and so I'm still working through lots of bits and pieces. So this is the Garter Ridge blanket. It is by Orange Flower. It is a free pattern and available on their website. I have it linked in the show notes, and it is just a garter rib blanket that basically only 2 rows repeat. And what I am doing is I am using some Cloudborn. It's called Highland DK. I don't really think it feels like DK. I think it feels like probably fingering or sport weight, but it is in this autumn heather colorway, this orange kind of pumpkin, and then I am combining it with lots and bits and bobs of leftovers from various projects that I did while I was sample knitting for Zen Yarn Garden. So it's going to be all the colors and everything but the kitchen sink, and I really like how it's coming out. I have some that are more white and speckled and some that are more colored, and so I'm just kind of working through those. It is wide. It is going to be 40 inches wide, and my hope is that it will be that tall as well, or maybe even taller. So it's a pretty decent sized blanket. Actually, it might be more than 40. I really should measure that because it's really pretty big. And honestly, I'm just going to keep going on it until I decide I'm done or run out of yarn or one of those two things. And the point is just, it's a project that makes me happy, and it's using up yarn that's in my stash that I didn't have other projects for, and that I kind of just wanted to use up and get going. So I'm pleased with that, and I will continue to work on that. I just started this maybe 2 weeks ago, and I'm already 2 skeins in. I have 4 or 5 more skeins, and then, like I said, I did find more on Ravelry, and so I may reach out and purchase some extras so that I can keep going, because it seems like I'm getting about 4 inches a skein, which means I would definitely need at least 10 skeins to finish. And of course I have 6. So I'll probably reach out and get 4 or 5 more skeins to try and make that a good size blanket. So that is what I have going on there. Those are the 2 knitting projects. My guess is you won't see anything really new on those because I don't want to cast anything else on until Nanny Swaymo, which is coming faster than you can imagine. It is the 7th, which means I still have about 3.5, 4 weeks until that happens. But I would love to get some socks out of the way. So I'm going to continue working on those and then swatch for my Nanny Swaymo sweater, which I will talk more about in a future episode. So spinning wise, I am working on a braid of Lorelei, which is Polworth. I may have shown you this finished at Bobbin last week. I cannot remember. I'm now on to the second half of the spinning, and I did not get very much spinning done at all last week because I was working on other things and trying to get out of town, and then I wasn't home for knit night over the weekend. So this is another project for this week. Hopefully I'll finish the singles this week and then maybe get into the plying this weekend or next week. The other thing that I was going to say is I have 2 things that I sort of need to finish this week. I need to wash and block my niece's sweater. That is the Cove cardigan. I just finished knitting that. The buttons are on the way. I got the shipping notice this morning, and so I need to wash and block that, trim the ends, and sew the buttons on. And then my nephew's sweater that I knit several months ago, the Minecraft sweater, I have a little bit of duplicate stitching on that, weaving in all the ends and then washing and blocking that. And I hope to get both of those projects done this week because I want to ship those out in time for the kids' birthdays, which are later this month. And then, like I said, the only thing I have left is socks for the holidays and then whatever else I want to knit. And I am enjoying using up some stash, and my Nanny Swaymo will be entirely out of stash because that is my challenge to myself, to really use my stash and not do much in the way of purchasing. So, and I was pleased to go to the Space Center because it meant I could go to the Space Center, enjoy myself, buy some souvenirs, and not come home with extra yarn or fabric. So that is always good. So let's talk about quilting. I have some binding to put on the last quilt, and then I will take some photos. I'm not sure that I will actually get to bring in and show you, because if all goes according to plan, I am going to finish the binding in the next couple nights, take it to Quilt Guild to show it off on Thursday, and take it to Anna on Saturday to give it to her. So I picked it up late last week. All it needs is binding, and again, my hope is to sew that on hopefully this evening, and then do some hand stitching the next couple nights so that I can take that with me to Quilt Guild and show it off and then take it elsewhere. I'm really, really pleased with the long armor who finished it for me. She did a lovely job. I picked a motif. I thought it was going to be a little smaller than it is, but I think actually it works. It's kind of a big motif, but it looks almost like calligraphy flourishes. And if you remember, the fabric that I used is a line by Rashida Coleman Hale. It's called Salutations, and it had washi tape and pens and stamps and letter writing. And so I thought kind of the calligraphy swirls and flourishes was a really good motif for it. And I'm really pleased with the way it came out. And actually, she made a thread suggestion to me, and I wasn't 100% sold on it, but it actually looks really beautiful. She used a dark blue thread, which actually does show up quite a bit on the quilting, and I'm really pleased with it. So Very happy with that. And I will take some photos, and maybe that'll be the cover image next time. So you'll get to see it, but unfortunately I won't show it because it will be gone by then. But that is okay because she watches the podcast, so I also don't want to spoil her. So that leaves me with, and I showed you the pillowcases that I made last week. So that leaves me with not much on my machine, and I have decided to start 2 new projects. Why 2, you ask? Because normally I try to be a little bit monogamous when it comes to quilting, even though I'm not when it comes to knitting. And the answer is because I am doing a block of the month quilt in conjunction with work. But that only has 1 or sometimes a couple blocks of the month, and the quilt will be constructed over a 6-month period. So my plan is to work on the first block this weekend. And it's like the center block of the whole quilt, but there's only 1 of them. So once I make that block, I actually have to wait for the next installment of the pattern and the next tutorial to come out to make block 2. These are called block of the month programs. If you're a quilter, I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a little bit like a knit along, a Mr. Knit Along, in the sense that like new clues come out every so often. In this case, new clues come out once a month. So, and I happen to know next month's is a doozy because it is a pinwheel block and there are a bazillion pinwheels in the quilt. So I think we make all the pinwheel blocks in 1 month. So, anyway, that is one thing that I'm starting, and then I wanted to go ahead and start another quilt so that if I finish the block this weekend, I have at least 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks until I can do the next set of blocks. So I wanted to start something else, so I have something else on the way. So that will involve my changing threads a lot, which I realize might not be the best, but I guess we'll figure that out when we get there. So I wanted to show you the 2 bits of fabric that I am working with. So the first one that I wanted to show you is the project that I'm working on for work. And I sort of volunteered to be a part of this because it's a big work project. As you know, the 250th anniversary of America is coming up next year. So we were founded in 1776. So it stands to reason in 2026, we will be 250 years old. There is some argument about whether we're already in our 250th year because the way counting goes. So we at Missouri Star have started a sew-along for this. The pattern is called Fireworks Finale, and it is a really, really beautiful kit. I don't have a photo of it, but I will link to it in the show notes. It is a beautiful kit made of stars and pinwheels, and it is made in red, white, and blue. So it obviously looks red, white, and blue, but it's also not it's not flag waving. It's not like I mean, you would know it's a patriotic quilt, but it's also not quite in your face patriotic. Now, to be 100% honest, I have mixed feelings about my country right now, and so working on a patriotic project is a choice. But that said, we are sort of embracing the history of sewing, 250 years of sewing in the United States, and all that entails, both good and bad. And we, are embracing celebrating 250 years. So I have chosen to work on this quilt, and what I have chosen to do is we have a kit of fabrics, but I wanted to do something a little different than the kit. And so I purchased fabrics on my own to make this quilt. And there is an organization called Quilts of Valor that accepts donation quilts for soldiers, veterans. And what I have decided to do is make this red, white, and blue quilt along so that I can participate in the company sew along. I can share photos along the way. I can enjoy the experience. And then when I am all done, I will finish the quilt and I will donate it to Quilts of Valor and it will go to a veteran. So I feel like that is a good use of the project, a good in the spirit of community sewing and taking care of the community. And so that is what I have decided to do. So mostly what I wanted to do was just show you the fabrics that I picked. Like I said, I will link to the pattern. It is a free sew-along. There are 6 months of free tutorials. And if you have fabric in your stash and you would like to participate, you can totally do that. It can be made scrappy. There is no requirement to purchase anything. And if you are interested, I would love to see you sew along with us. I will be showing you my blocks as I go, just because I think it will be fun and I'll be working on it once a month. So I picked a variety of fabrics from a certain fabric line. Northcott Fabrics has a line that they call Stonehenge, and they are fabrics that are basically more or less marbled in gradient. They look like marble, so they are textured. They have, to me, it reminds me a little bit of, I'm totally spoiled by kettle dyed indie yarns. And, you know, sometimes when you have a kettle dyed yarn, it has some depth and texture, even if it only has one color. You just get a little bit of variation in it, and it just gives it kind of a richer look versus a commercial, say, Cascade, or some of the others where it is kind of just a flat color that doesn't have like any depth to it. And so these fabrics are a little bit more like the indie dyed in the sense that they have some depth to them. So I picked red, white, and blue colors. I'm definitely doing that. So my background is going to be, sorry, I didn't realize there was so much plastic in here. I hadn't opened this yet, but I want to show you what I'm doing. So the background of my quilt and likely the backing is going to be this Narc Navy Blue. Dark navy blue, and you can see that it is somewhat patterned. It just has like a marbleized texture on it, so it's not got a very defined pattern to it, but it's just got a little bit of texture, and I think that will be fun. So that is my background fabric. Then I have a white. I selected kind of a white marbled fabric. It's a little bit harder to tell, but there actually is some, well, you can see a little bit there. There is some variation. It's kind of a cream. It's not a bright white, and it is a little bit marbleized. The only one that was sort of a print as opposed to a marbled texture is this one. I got this light blue, and technically this is supposed to be clouds. You can kind of see that there are cloud shapes on here, but again, this is like a marbleized texture to give me some variation in color. But not to be like bright and printed. As I said, I'm not like patriotic. This is just definitely themed colors. The next color that I got was this sapphire blue because I thought these two looked nice together, and it would even look nice against the navy backing if I wanted to do some pinwheels and other lighter things. And then I have two reds that are actually fairly close. I had been hoping that they were a little further apart, and I may actually find something else to use in this project, but I have two reds. They are not exactly the same because one is more red and one is slightly more orange. It might be hard for you to tell, but I know they actually are different SKU numbers. What is this one called? This one is called Cardinal, and I think this one was, yeah, this is cherry. So they really, this one is darker, but they're actually too close. So I'm probably going to have to find something else. Anyway, so those are my red, white, and blues that I'm going to start on my red, white, and blue project. And as I said at the end, that is going to become a donation to Quilts of Valor. I'm very excited about that. It is a worthy organization. And you know, it's interesting because I don't see myself making a lot of patriotic projects. Like there are some quilters who absolutely love Americana fabric and stash it. I've never actually been that type of quilter, but I'm excited to do just a really kind of it will be a patriotic quilt because it is red, white, and blue, but I don't need eagles and overt flags and all of those kinds of things. I'm just excited to make stars and pinwheels and fun things so that we can so that I will have a nice quilt to donate in 6 months. So that is the first project. The second project is my trying to use up more of my quilting stash, things that I buy when they go on sale. I have this really cute fat quarter bundle. It is blues and pinks, and so it's like paisleys and fun florals. And my plan is to just put together a fun, I love the stripey, and then like dots and textures. And so my plan is to put together I have a, let's see, what is this? This is, what was this designed for? This is designed by Josh Ray. This is Fabric Palette, and I don't know who makes it. It's from Fabric Editions. So I got it when it was on deep discount. I probably only paid like $20 for it. And it is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 fat quarters. So I have a fat quarter pattern that I'm really looking forward to. It's pretty simple, but it just like cuts and mixes them up. And then my plan is to just make as big a quilt as I can with these. And then it will probably be a donation quilt as well. I'm just testing out more patterns and having more fun. And then I might use this as the backing. It doesn't quite match. It's a little bit more purple than the pinks in the quilt, but this was also on sale. This is an Adelie. It is a 2-yard cut, so it's 72 inches by 44 inches, and I think it might work for the quilt of the size that I want to make. There is a specific place I'm thinking about donating it to, and they want quilts that are 38 by 50. And so my thought is I can probably get that out of this. And then I would probably just use this for the binding, or I might find something else in my stash if I have some blue or something fun. So that is going to be the other one. And I will show you some of that as I start to work through that. So those are my fabric adventures. I have fiber adventures and knitting adventures planned. And that will happen in the next few weeks. So thank you for joining me. Again, I apologize for being a day late. I hope there was something to amuse you in here, and I will be taking some photos and getting this one up on the web for you. I hope that you have a wonderful week ahead, and I will see you next week on time, and hopefully with more to show you. So I will say, as always, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.